morning, mathematicians. Here are your notes 1.6, talking about displaying and organizing data. Today's goal is to be able to display and organize data. It's as simple as that. Before we get started, I want you to jump through here just like we did in yesterday's lesson and go ahead and fill out this what I think it means column. If you have to pause the video, go ahead and do that now. Alright, hopefully you had time to fill that out. If you automatically knew what those were, totally awesome. We're going to go through it again in case we could improve our definitions. Or for those of you who didn't know, we're going to go through them too. So a chart or graph, you might be able to draw a picture, but you might not be able to define it. That's okay. All a chart or a graph is a visual representation of data or of information. There we go. So an example of this would be a bar graph, or a coordinate plane is technically a graph. So let's write a few of those down. Bar graph, pie chart, however many you want. You can even draw a picture in there if you prefer. Promise that's an R, not an N. All right, next vocab word, the mean. Another word for this is average, and that is actually also the definition, the average. And an average is the sum of all numbers in a data set. So sum of all numbers divided by the number of data points, divided by number of data points. Oh, I'm struggling to fit in the box, but that's okay. So an example of this is if I give you the numbers 1, 3, 5, and let's make it nice. Give me a minute. Let's do 7. If I give you these 4 numbers, the average is going to be what happens when I add these up. 1, 3, 5, 7 would be 4, 9, 16. There are 4 numbers in the data set, so I'm going to divide it by 4. So 16 divided by 4 is going to be 4, and this would be my average, or my mean. The median, it is the middle number in a set of data, middle number of data, but it has to be organized from least to greatest. So if I give you the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, my median is going to be the middle. And I usually do that by just checking off numbers. 4 is going to be my median because it's the middle number in a set of data that was organized from least to greatest. And last but certainly not least, the mode. This is the number that occurs the most. Number that occurs most. Now, one thing to know about this, if we don't have a number that occurs the most in a set of data, like this set here, this would be a set with no mode. We can also have a set of numbers that has 2 modes. So for example, if I had 2 3s and 2 4s, that would be a bimodal data set because it has 2. But let's just do a simple example here. 1, 3, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 7. In this case, the number that occurs the most often is 3, so my mode is 3. Just like that. Important, this is another word or phrase that you should know, but I'm not going to have you define it. Mean, median, and mode are all measures or examples of central tendency. What this means is they all tell me something, or usually tell me something, about the central tendency of data, or the middle of data. All right, let's get away from those definitions and look at a real example. Why would we be using these terms? Well, in order to prepare for a presentation, the math department has to talk about student achievement on the first exam. Since this is the best Algebra 1 in PHS history, I predict the scores of that assessment to be all above 88%. In fact, my prediction of a sampling of scores, meaning these aren't actual scores, they're just a prediction, would be shown there. And then it asks us to organize the data into a line plot and then answer the questions below. So I've got my line plot, I've got my data. And in order to do a line plot, we just have to create dots. And we're going to put a dot on this line plot for each data point we have. So I'm going to indicate my data starting here, ending here, and then I'm going to use my finger to remember to move along so I don't miss any. All right, 88%, dot, 99%, dot, 95%, dot, and so on and so forth. If you want to do this on your own, you can, or just follow along with me as I do it. Notice I'm not making these dots very big. I don't have to because I can see them just fine the way they are. 89. All right, there is my data set with all of my data points. Now I'm going to use that information, I'm going to use this chart, essentially, to answer these questions. And I want to quick ask you this. Why would I want to put it on a chart like this instead of just having a list of data like this? Can you think of why that might be? You might have had a lot of different answers, but the easiest one for me would be that it's easier to look at. I think it's a lot easier to look at this chart and say, oh, I had a lot more 95s than I did 91s or 2s. If I'm just looking at this large data set, it's kind of hard to see what number came up most or what numbers didn't come up at all. So let's jump down to those questions. What is the most prevalent score, meaning which one occurred the most? Well, based on our graph and the number of dots, I would say 95% was the most common because 5 students had that score. If I ask for the most prevalent score, that would also be a measure of mode. That's the one that came up the most. How many students scored above 95? Notice it says above and not above or equal to 95, meaning we're not going to include those 5 students. They scored at 95, not above it. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have 5 students that scored above. How many students scored in the 80s? Well, that would be anything under 90, not including it. That would be 5. Again, 5 students. How many students were part of the sample? That would be however many data points I have. So I've got 6, 7, 8. 8 and 5 is 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So that should be 18 students. And I can double check that math by checking to make sure I had 18 original data points as well. Now, be prepared. I didn't ask you to calculate any of these, but because they're review, we should know how at this point. If you don't, that's not a big deal. Come and talk to me and we'll work through it together. This has been your review on displaying and organizing data. Let me know if you have any questions.